regards, isn't
Yes.
it?
And I know one woman died from her ventriloquism.
Who was that?
But I don't know her name, I bet you do. With her utterances, she was objecting to the marriage of Henry VIII.
To Anne Boleyn.
To Anne Boleyn.
Her name was Elizabeth Barton, and she was
Right.
known as the Holy Maid of Kent. And she was a very good ventriloquist, and so these voices would come without her mouth moving, as it were, from her stomach.
Nice
in which
too.
she would... in which she would say things. And she became very, very popular until she started to say...
The bloke looking at her tits.
Yeah, well... you wouldn't do that.
You've got yours out as well tonight, you know. Is that to distract from the lip movement?
And she did very well. She was very popular until she said that if Henry VIII married Anne Boleyn, he would be deposed, and Henry VIII didn't like that at all, so had her head chopped off. And ironically, her head was put on top of a pole outside.
And carried on talking.
Well, you wonder about it. It is quite a strange fate for a ventriloquist to have their head stuck on a pole. But she was indeed, she suffered for her art. But in the 19th century, it became known to be a piece of entertainment rather than demonic spirits. But the first ventriloquists on stage didn't have dummies. Did you know that?
What did they have?
Well, they used to do things like voices inside
just throw in your
suitcases.
voice.
And there would be ones who would do chimney sweeps, where there'd be a chimney and they would do the sound of the chimney sweep boy going up the chimney and getting more and more smothered and quieter and more distant as he went. And they get huge rounds of applause. But it was a man called Fred Russell who came up with it. His character, Coster Joe, was one of the first
Was
dummies.
he blind? He made that one afternoon.
It's not the most beautiful object you've ever seen, is it? But that's when the dummies became popular. And there were many, many famous acts, and some of them rather bizarrely, on radio. Educating Archie. Educating Archie was one of the most successful radio comedy shows in BBC radio history. And Peter Brough, there was Peter Brough. There's Archie, where it was a radio show.
And he had the puppet the whole time? He
Yeah,
never even
well,
bothered... Oh, what's the point for the puppet?
It's the show that Tony Hancock first appeared on, in fact. He made the terrible mistake, Peter Brough, when television arrived, of appearing on television. And he just spoke like this while his puppet was talking. I mean, he didn't even begin to venture towards ventriloquism.
Nina is a ventriloquist, apparently.
Nina is, are you?
And yet to see evidence of that. But my mentor, Ken Campbell, who taught me ventriloquism,
Yes.
he excited me by saying that people don't say the first thing that comes into their head, they say the second thing.
Right.
And we're all balmier than we let it be known.
Yes.
Once your insanity starts to leak, that's when they put you away. But the ventriloquated doll can allow us access to the madness
It's a
of the
kind of
ventriloquator.
sort of Tourette's, as
It's
it were,
Tourette's.
almost.
Licensed Tourette's, dear. Yeah.
Licensed Tourette's. That's a very good
shot.
thing. Ken Campbell was one of the true great men of the 20th century as an entertainer, a director, a showmaker, actor, comic, and ventriloquist. And he was... what happened to his dolls?
Oh, he bequeathed them to me in
He
his
did,
will.
didn't he?
And I'm one of them, you see.
Are you really?
Yes.
Were you one of Ken Campbell's?
I was one of his, yes. So it's been recycled. And
But there is a doll heaven, isn't there?
there is a doll heaven. We've just made a film about this.
Oh, have you?
Yes, because when Ken left me his puppets in his will, I found about this place called Vent Haven in Kentucky, where donkeys go to rest. There it is,
Stop screaming, would you?
If you're a caliurophobe, you would be... but that's right, so over 700 ventriloquists who've died have bequeathed their puppets to Vent Haven, Kentucky. And apart from Gran, that's where...
Who do you
No,
reckon?
I'm there, actually. I'm there
Who do
now.
you reckon's murdered the most?
You think you're Chucky in Child's Play, aren't you? I mean, your classic puppet was, of course, a really big, round, blue-eyed sort of thing with dark eyebrows and a very, very particular sort of look, wasn't it? Do you recognise what that still is from?
Magic.
Magic,
Yeah.
the film Magic. And this story is the classic of the ventriloquist who gets taken over, gets possessed. Do you think there's any truth in that? I mean, do ventriloquists get a bit slightly too close? Does Keith Harris get a bit too close?
I can't speak for him.
No.
Because you're not that good a ventriloquist. I know that I have fallen for my puppets. What
Really?
do you mean, dear? Well, I have on stage sometimes looked at Granny and thought, why aren't you saying anything? It's your line.
Oh, really? That's hilarious.
Yeah. Now the madness is starting to kick
So,
in.
yeah, it must be a wildly schizophrenic profession. Though on what dark night of the soul Keith Harris invented a duck like that? It is.
Or a haircut like
Never
that.
mind, yes, I was going to say that. That's for the shirt, holy smoke.
Well, still.
I love the fact that Orville's in a nappy, that's my favourite.
That was the odd... It was odd, wasn't it? A duck in a nappy.
Which was the opposite of Donald Duck.
The opposite of-
Because he always had his privates out, didn't he?
Yes. Good point. Yep, there you go.
Well, very good point. Very good point.
Thank you.
I think I've made that point excellently. And,
Yeah.
I'm delighted with that point.
Good.
I've made.
I'll give you a point for that point.
I get a point for
Yeah,
that.
you get a
Thank
point
you.
for that point. The art of ventriloquism has come on in leeks and gowns since back in the good old
doing
days.
it now, you're doing
Yeah,
it
I'm
funny
doing it
now.
now. Speaking of which of you here has or has ever had or used to have an imaginary friend? Did you ever, Gran? Did you have an imaginary friend?
I think... you can't say his name. I think Bill Daly, that's a hard one. I think you're my imaginary friend. You're slightly out of focus.
Really?
A fuzzy kind of...
Wait, so
and you, Sean,
that's
you're
very
a-
strange.
What?
I mean, my reality is being called into question by... This is one of the odder conversations I've had, but...
If your imaginary friend falls over in the forest and there's no one to hear, does that... I can't
That's a
finish
very
this
good
sentence.
philosophical point. We're getting Bishop Berkeley from Gran. I'm very impressed. Did you have one? I mean, a lot of children do. Did you have an imaginary friend when you were young?
I'm not aware of it.
No, your mother would
They
have
didn't
told
used to
you.
come around much.
Right.
An imaginary friend who doesn't play with
An
you.
imaginary friend who cuts you dead.
Yeah, I wanted to be his friend.
That's so sad.
He just wasn't interested.
We're all familiar with, obviously, the concept of it, and the fact that a lot of children do seem to have imaginary friends, which can worry their parents.
It's really peculiar.
It is peculiar. That you have to lay places at table for them, they have to be given, you know, seats on sofas to watch television, and so on, and they have tea parties for them. But it seems, according to psychiatrists, that having an imaginary friend is a very good thing for a child, and that the children who have had them tend to have more social and verbal skills than those who don't. Although, it must be said, a certain proportion of them are malevolent. Some people have imaginary friends who scare their children, which is a very worrying thought. A nasty imaginary friend.
I hear voices.
What's that, though?
Do you?
But I ignore them and I just carry on killing.
The voices that said, stop killing people, Sean.
Sean, you know this
Stop
is
it.
wrong. You know this is wrong, Sean. This isn't fair. They don't deserve it. I ignore them.
Yeah.
It is, yes, it's quite a phenomenon. It was actually Yasser Arafat, of all people, who said the history of religious wars is the history of people fighting over their imaginary friends. It's weird, the leader of the PLO, the man who founded the Palestinian movement, which is now, of course, so bound up with religious extremism, was himself rather sceptical about it all. The world has hardly come on, has it? Let's be honest.
Interesting thing I know about him,
Yeah.
he married a French woman. You wouldn't think that, would you?
It's not beyond the bounds of reason.
Well, you think he's very interested in helping his local area.
Yes.
Yeah.
He'd choose one of his local women.
Yes, but the very nature of being a Palestinian meant he had no homeland in which to live, so it's quite likely he would choose someone from a homeland where he had had to reside in exile. And many did in France, in fact.
Or maybe she was just an imaginary wife.
Maybe she was an imaginary Frenchman, or maybe she was just damn hot.
She's foxy.
Foxy, exactly. Renard.
Was he a...
I imagine one of the
Was
attractions
he a
is...
pussy hound? I don't know.
I-
I said that. Something's gone wrong.
I'm intrigued to know that... I'm intrigued to think that you thought that was what I was about to say. You looked into my eyes and thought, he's going to say pussy hound. I'll beat him to it. I'll beat him to the punch.
Now,
Is a pussy hound like a liger? It's a kind of a cat and a dog together.
It was like a dog that we used to actually... that gentlemen would send out to find ladies.
It's
like
a combination.
dog.
So it's kind of both independent yet loyal.
yes.
Yeah.
I like the idea of that. Very good.
Disgusting.
Now, Candice Bergen. actress.
Oh,
yes.
Fond of her?
She
Superb
was,
actress.
She's very,
and still
very
is.
beautiful.
Very, very beautiful. Didn't have so much an imaginary friend as an imaginary brother. Can you imagine why that might be?
It was Charlie McCarthy, wasn't it?
Charlie, exactly,
It was
because the most famous American ventriloquist was
Edgar Bergen.
Edgar Bergen. He was
His
a huge
lips
star.
moved too.
Huge star. And his puppet was called Charlie McCarthy. And in the house, he had his own bedroom, his own wardrobe, monogrammed clothes. And Edgar Bergen's real daughter, Candice, was brought up basically as Charlie McCarthy's brother in a rather freakish and extraordinary way. It's amazing she's turned out as sane as she is. Now, you all have an invention under your benches, and we'd like to know what they are. What are we looking at?
Well, it's some kind of measuring device.
We've given it to you for a reason.
Oh,
Is all I
really?
can say. Yeah, you, a particular quality you have, you might be more likely to guess it than others.
Oh, I see. Is it a beard measuring device?
No, well, I wouldn't call your beard a quality. I mean, it's a lovely beard, but it's not a quality.
Whoa,
it's a feature.
Hey, you crossed the line, Fry.
It's a feature.
Don't
It's a
diss the
lovely,
beard.
charming facial feature.
Right.
It has a musical connection.
It has a musical connection. Oh,
If you are a certain kind of instrumentalist, you might be born, as it were, with limitations that annoy you.
wait a minute. Is this something which stretches the reach of a pianist
Yes.
so he can reach
exactly
up?
what
Wow.
it is. Yeah, well done. Well done. You put it down, that's right, and each time you stretch it, because most people might be able to manage an octave, you know,
Right.
one C to C kind of thing, and some, as you know, can do go to C to E.
I can do C to E.
Can you? That's
Yes.
a wide reach.
It is a wide reach. I see. So that's it. So the hand would go in there,
Yeah.
and then you just undo this thing here,
And that's right, and stretch, and
and
stretch,
then
until
this would
eventually...
then stretch and
Yeah.
stretch and stretch like that.
Yeah. Supposedly it would give you... Ow, exactly.
Ah.
So, what have you got there, Sean?
It's a bottle, Stephen,
And what do you think it was for?
for putting stuff in.
OK, so, Mex, moving on to you. What have you got there?
Is this one 9? It's a suppository for Charlie McCarthy.
Well, do you know the bizarre thing is you're not far off.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yes,
no.
if you can
It's
unscrew the
taper
bottom.
tip.
If you unscrew the
You
bottom
have to
part.
help me, Graham.
Yes.
With my teeth, yeah. Graham, help me. I can't get
You
a
get-
grip.
Maybe Bill will help.
You get one of those with a
I can't do it, dear.
Yes,
preparation H.
you get one of the...
Wait a
Alan's
minute.
on
Has
it.
this been up someone's ass?
Yes.
Yeah.
Alan has exactly got it.
You screw, when you get preparation H,
Yeah.
you screw a plastic one of those on
Yeah.
the top, you insert it in your rectum,
Yeah.
and the
Out of the holes
shark oil comes out the holes.
comes the hemorrhoid treatment, exactly right. For the treatment of hemorrhoids.
Right. So what happens? This unscrews.
Yeah. And you pop in the ointment.
You put the ointment goes in there.
Yeah, then you screw it up.
Then-
Then,
right.
then you put the thing up your body.
Up the
and then
old,
You, then you screw that, and as you
taxi.
screw it up, the ointment
Squirts
squirts up, reaching all the
out.
places it needs to reach.
Squirts out. Happy
That's
days,
quite clever.
dear. Happy
Because at least half the people on the planet will be afflicted with hemorrhoids at some point in their lives. So it is-
to do something you could self-medicate or.
yes, you could do it. You don't need to.
Oh,
You can
yeah.
ask
I'll
a friend
do
to
it
do it if
for
you
you.
want to. An imaginary friend, I think, would be best, to be perfectly honest. What are yours, Alan? What have you got?
I've got on a pair of glasses that enable me to see into my lap. Now, I wonder
Yeah.
if they're... Because I can read this book,
Yeah.
right, but I'm looking up at you.
Yeah.
So whilst I'm looking down, I can read and write, but see straight ahead. So are they for an artist or a painter?
No, actually, they're more sort of lazy than that. They're called lying down spectacles. You'd lie in bed and you'd put the book on your chest and you'd be able to read like that, lying down. It's rather elegant and pleasing,
Actually,
isn't
no,
it?
that's exactly what you need when you're sunbathing, and you always have to hold
Yes,
the book like
wouldn't
that.
that be ideal?
And actually, yeah, you can do it.
Absolutely perfect.
Yeah, it doesn't look weird at all. It's great.
If you caught the sun on the mirror, you'd be instantly blinded.
Blinded.
That would be the problem. It's a surprisingly clear image, isn't it? And here I have this little device with a cork on the end, and this, it's in the shape almost of a policeman's whistle, which is a hint, because policemen would carry these around.